Chapter 20 of She. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Graham Redman. She by H. Rider Haggard. Chapter 20. Triumph. Then followed a moment of the most painful silence that I ever endured. It was broken by Aisha, who addressed herself to Leo. "Nay, now, my lord and guest," she said in her softest tones, which had yet the ring of steel about them, "look not so bashful. Surely the sight was a pretty one, the leopard and the lion." "Oh, hang it all!" said Leo in English. "And thou, Ustâne," she went on, "surely I should have passed thee by, had not the light fallen on the white across thy hair." And she pointed to the bright edge of the rising moon, which was now appearing above the horizon. "Well, well, the dance is done. See, the tapers have burnt down, and all things end in silence and in ashes. So thou thoughtest it a fit time for love, Ustâne, my servant, and I, dreaming not that I could be disobeyed, thought thee already far away." "Play not with me," moaned the wretched woman. "Slay me, and let there be an end." "Nay, why? It is not well to go so swift from the hot lips of love down to the cold mouth of the grave." And she made a motion to the mutes, who instantly stepped up and caught the girl by either arm. With an oath Leo sprang upon the nearest and hurled him to the ground, and then stood over him with his face set and his fist ready. Again Aisha laughed. "It was well thrown, my guest. Thou hast a strong arm for one who so late was sick. But now, out of thy courtesy, I pray thee, let that man live, and do my bidding. He shall not harm the girl. The night air grows chill, and I would welcome her in mine own place. Surely she whom thou dost favour shall be favoured of me also." I took Leo by the arm and pulled him from the prostrate mute, and he, half bewildered, obeyed the pressure. Then we all set out for the cave across the plateau, where a pile of white human ashes was all that remained of the fire that had lit the dancing, for the dancers had vanished. In due course we gained Aisha's boudoir. All too soon, it seemed to me, having a sad presage of what was to come lying heavy on my heart. Aisha seated herself upon her cushions, and, having dismissed Job and Bilali, by signs bade the mutes tend the lamps and retire, all save one girl, who was her favourite personal attendant. We three remained standing, the unfortunate Ustâne a little to the left of the rest of us. "Now, O Holly," Aisha began, "how came it that thou, who didst hear my words bidding this evil-doer," and she pointed to Ustâne, "to go hence, thou at whose prayer I did weakly spare her life, how came it, I say, that thou wast a sharer in what I saw to-night? Answer, and for thine own sake, I say, speak all the truth, for I am not minded to hear lies upon this matter." "It was by accident, O Queen," I answered. "I knew naught of it." "I do believe thee, O Holly," she answered coldly, "and well it is for thee that I do. Then does the whole guilt rest upon her." "I do not find any guilt therein," broke in Leo. "She is not another man's wife, and it appears that she has married me according to the custom of this awful place. So who is the worse? Anyway, madam," he went on, Whatever she has done, I have done too, so if she is to be punished, let me be punished also. And I tell thee," he went on, working himself up into a fury, "that if thou biddest one of those deaf and dumb villains to touch her again, I will tear him to pieces." And he looked as though he meant it. Ayesha listened in icy silence and made no remark. When he had finished, however, she addressed Ustâne. "Hast thou aught to say, woman? Thou silly straw, thou feather, who didst think to float towards thy passion's petty ends, even against the great wind of my will. Tell me, for I fain would understand. Why didst thou this thing?" And then I think I saw the most tremendous exhibition of moral courage and intrepidity that it is possible to conceive. For the poor doomed girl, knowing what she had to expect at the hands of her terrible queen, knowing too from bitter experience how great was her adversary's power, yet gathered herself together, and out of the very depths of her despair drew materials to defy her. "I did it, O she," she answered, drawing herself up to the full of her stately height, and throwing back the panther skin from her head, "because my love is stronger than the grave. I did it because my life without this man whom my heart chose would be but a living death. Therefore did I risk my life, and, now that I know that it is forfeit to thine anger, yet am I glad that I did risk it, and pay it away in the risking, I, because he embraced me once, and told me that he loved me yet." Here Ayesha half rose from her couch, and then sank down again. "I have no magic," went on Ustâne, her rich voice ringing strong and full, "and I am not a queen, nor do I live forever, but a woman's heart is heavy to sink through waters, however deep, O queen, and a woman's eyes are quick to see, even through thy veil, O queen. Listen, I know it, thou dost love this man thyself, and therefore wouldst thou destroy me who stand across thy path. I die. I die and go into the darkness, nor know I whither I go. But this I know, there is a light shining in my breast, and by that light, as by a lamp, I see the truth, and the future that I shall not share unroll itself before me like a scroll. When first I knew my lord," and she pointed to Leo, "I knew also that death would be the bridal gift he gave me. It rushed upon me of a sudden, but I turned not back, being ready to pay the price, and behold, death is here. And now, even as I knew that, so do I, standing on the steps of doom, know that thou shalt not reap the profit of thy crime. Mine he is, and though thy beauty shine like a sun among the stars, mine shall he remain for thee. Never here in this life shall he look thee in the eyes and call thee spouse. Thou too art doomed, I see," and her voice rang like the cry of an inspired prophetess. "Ah, I see!" Then came an answering cry of mingled rage and terror. I turned my head. Ayesha had risen, and was standing with her outstretched hand pointing at Ustâne, who had suddenly stopped speaking. I gazed at the poor woman, and as I gazed there came upon her face that same woeful fixed expression of terror that I had seen once before, when she had broken out into her wild chant. Her eyes grew large, her nostrils dilated, and her lips blanched. Ayesha said nothing. She made no sound. She only drew herself up, stretched out her arm, and, her tall veiled frame quivering like an aspen leaf, appeared to look fixedly at her victim. Even as she did so, Ustâni put her hands to her head, uttered one piercing scream, turned round twice, and then fell backwards with a thud, prone upon the floor. Both Leo and myself rushed to her. She was stone dead, blasted into death by some mysterious electric agency or overwhelming will force, whereof the dread she had command. For a moment Leo did not quite realize what had happened. But when he did, his face was awful to see. With a savage oath he rose from beside the corpse, and, turning, literally sprang at Ayesha. But she was watching, and seeing him come, stretched out her hand again, and he went staggering back towards me, and would have fallen had I not caught him. Afterwards he told me that he felt as though he had suddenly received a violent blow in the chest, and, what is more, utterly cowed, as if all the manhood had been taken out of him. Then Ayesha spoke. "Forgive me, my guest," she said softly, addressing him, "if I have shocked thee with my justice." "Forgive thee, thou fiend!" roared poor Leo, wringing his hands in his rage and grief. "Forgive thee, thou murderess! By heaven, I will kill thee if I can." "Nay, nay," she answered in the same soft voice. "Thou dost not understand. The time has come for thee to learn. Thou art my love, my Callicrates, my beautiful, my strong. For 2000 years, Callicrates, have I waited for thee, and now at length thou hast come back to me. And as for this woman," pointing to the corpse, "she stood between me and thee, and therefore have I laid her in the dust, Callicrates." "It is an accursed lie," said Leo. "My name is not Callicrates. I am Leo Vinci. My ancestor was Callicrates, at least I believe he was." "Ah, thou sayest it. Thine ancestor was Callicrates, and thou, even thou, art Callicrates reborn, come back, and mine own dear lord. I am not Callicrates, and as for being thy lord, or having aught to do with thee, I had sooner be the lord of a fiend from hell, for she would be better than thou." "Sayest thou so? Sayest thou so, Callicrates? Nay, but thou hast not seen me for so long a time that no memory remains. Yet am I very fair, Callicrates. I hate thee, murderess, and I have no wish to see thee. What is it to me how fair thou art? I hate thee, I say. Yet within a very little space shalt thou creep to my knee, and swear that thou dost love me," answered Ayesha, with a sweet mocking laugh. "Come, there is no time like the present time, here before this dead girl who loved thee. Let us put it to the proof. Look now on me, Callicrates." And with a sudden motion she shook her gauzy covering from her, and stood forth in her low kirtle and her snaky zone, in her glorious radiant beauty and her imperial grace, rising from her wrappings, as it were, like Venus from the wave, or Galatea from her marble, or a beatified spirit from the tomb. She stood forth, and fixed her deep and glowing eyes upon Leo's eyes, and I saw his clenched fists unclasp, and his set and quivering features relax beneath her gaze. I saw his wonder and astonishment grow into admiration, and then into fascination, and the more he struggled, the more I saw the power of her dread beauty fasten on him and take possession of his senses, drugging them and drawing the heart out of him. Did I not know the process? Had not I, who was twice his age, gone through it myself? Was I not going through it afresh even then, although her sweet and passionate gaze was not for me? Yes, alas, I was. Alas, that I should have to confess that at that very moment I was rent by mad and furious jealousy. I could have flown at him, shame upon me. The woman had confounded and almost destroyed my moral sense, as she was bound to confound all who looked upon her superhuman loveliness. But, I do not quite know how, I got the better of myself, and once more turned to see the climax of the tragedy. "Oh, great heaven!" gasped Leo. "Art thou a woman?" "A woman in truth, in very truth, and thine own spouse, Callicrates," she answered, stretching out her rounded ivory arms towards him and smiling, ah, so sweetly. He looked and looked, and slowly I perceived that he was drawing nearer to her. Suddenly his eye fell upon the corpse of poor Ustane, and he shuddered and stopped. "How can I?" he said hoarsely. "Thou art a murderess. She loved me." Observe, he was already forgetting that he had loved her. "It is naught," she murmured, and her voice sounded sweet as the night wind passing through the trees. "It is naught at all. If I have sinned, let my beauty answer for my sin. If I have sinned, it is for love of thee. Let my sin therefore be put away and forgotten." And once more she stretched out her arms and whispered, "Come." And then in another few seconds it was all over. I saw him struggle, I saw him even turn to fly, but her eyes drew him more strongly than iron bonds, and the magic of her beauty and concentrated will and passion entered into him and overpowered him. Aye, even there in the presence of the body of the woman who had loved him well enough to die for him. It sounds horrible and wicked enough, but he should not be too greatly blamed, and be sure his sin will find him out. The temptress who drew him into evil was more than human, and her beauty was greater than the loveliness of the daughters of men. I looked up again, and now her perfect form lay in his arms, and her lips were pressed against his own. And thus, with the corpse of his dead love for an altar, did Leo Vinci plight his troth to her red-handed murderess, plight it for ever and a day. For those who sell themselves into a like dominion, paying down the price of their own honour, and throwing their soul into the balance to sink the scale to the level of their lusts, can hope for no deliverance here or hereafter. As they have sown, so shall they reap, and reap even when the poppy flowers of passion have withered in their hands, and their harvest is but bitter tares garnered in satiety. Suddenly, with a snake-like motion, she seemed to slip from his embrace, and then again broke out into her low laugh of triumphant mockery. "Did I not tell thee that within a little space thou wouldst creep to my knee, O Callicrates? And surely the space has not been a great one." Leo groaned in shame and misery, for though he was overcome and stricken down, he was not so lost as to be unaware of the depth of the degradation to which he had sunk. On the contrary, his better nature rose up in arms against his fallen self, as I saw clearly enough later on. Aisha laughed again, and then quickly veiled herself and made a sign to the girl mute, who had been watching the whole scene with curious, startled eyes. The girl left, and presently returned, followed by 2 male mutes, to whom the Queen made another sign. Thereon they all 3 seized the body of poor Ustane by the arms, and dragged it heavily down the cavern and away through the curtains at the end. Leo watched it for a little while, and then covered his eyes with his hand, and it too, to my excited fancy, seemed to watch us as it went. "There passes the dead past," said Aisha solemnly, as the curtains shook and fell back into their places, when the ghastly procession had vanished behind them. And then, with one of those extraordinary transitions of which I have already spoken, she again threw off her veil and broke out, after the ancient and poetic fashion of the dwellers in Arabia, into a paean of triumph or epithalamium, which, wild and beautiful as it was, is exceedingly difficult to render into English, and ought by rights to be sung to the music of a cantata rather than written and read. It was divided into 2 parts, one descriptive or definitive, and the other personal, and, as nearly as I can remember, ran as follows: "Love is like a flower in the desert. It is like the aloe of Arabia that blooms but once and dies. It blooms in the salt emptiness of life, and the brightness of its beauty is set upon the waste as a star is set upon a storm. It hath the sun above, that is the spirit, and above it blows the air of its divinity. At the echoing of a step love blooms, I say love blooms, and bends her beauty down to him who passeth by. He plucketh it, yea, he plucketh the red cup that is full of honey, and beareth it away, away across the desert, away till the flower be withered, away till the desert be done. There is only one perfect flower in the wilderness of life. That flower is love. There is only one fixed star in the midst of our wandering. That star is love. There is only one hope in our despairing night. That hope is love. All else is false, all else is shadow moving upon water, all else is wind and vanity. Who shall say what is the weight or the measure of love? It is born of the flesh, it dwelleth in the spirit, from each doth it draw its comfort. For beauty it is as a star. Many are its shapes, but all are beautiful, and none know where the star rose, or the horizon where it shall set." Footnote: among the ancient Arabians the power of poetic declamation, either in verse or prose, was held in the highest honour and esteem, and he who excelled in it was known as khatib, or orator. Every year a general assembly was held at which the rival poets repeated their compositions, when those poems which were judged to be the best were, so soon as the knowledge and the art of writing became general, inscribed on silk in letters of gold, and publicly exhibited, being known as al-Modhahabat, or golden verses. In the poem given above by Mr. Holly, Aisha evidently followed the traditional poetic manner of her people, which was to embody their thoughts in a series of somewhat disconnected sentences, each remarkable for its beauty and the grace of its expression. Editor. End of footnote. Then turning to Leo and laying her hand upon his shoulder, she went on in a fuller and more triumphant tone, speaking in balanced sentences that gradually grew and swelled from idealized prose into pure and majestic verse. Long have I loved thee, O my love, yet has my love not lessened. Long have I waited for thee, and behold, my reward is at hand, is here. Far away I saw thee once, and thou wast taken from me. Then in a grave sowed I the seed of patience, and shone upon it with the sun of hope, and watered it with tears of repentance, and breathed on it with the breath of my knowledge. And now, lo, it hath sprung up and borne fruit. Lo, out of the grave hath it sprung, yea, from among the dry bones and ashes of the dead. I have waited, and my reward is with me. I have overcome death, and death brought back to me him that was dead. Therefore do I rejoice, for fair is the future. Green are the paths that we shall tread across the everlasting meadows. The hour is at hand. Night hath fled away into the valleys. The dawn kisseth the mountain tops. Soft shall we live, my love, and easy shall we go. Crowned shall we be with the diadem of kings. Worshipping and wonder-struck all peoples of the world, blinded shall fall before our beauty and might. From time unto times shall our greatness thunder on, rolling like a chariot through the dust of endless days. Laughing shall we speed in our victory and pomp, laughing like the daylight as he leaps along the hills. Onward, still triumphant, to a triumph ever new. Onward in our power to a power unattained. Onward, never weary, clad with splendor for a robe, till accomplished be our fate, and the night is rushing down. She paused in her strange and most thrilling allegorical chant, of which I am unfortunately only able to give the burden, and that feebly enough, and then said, "Perchance thou dost not believe my word, Callicrates. Perchance thou thinkest that I do delude thee, and that I have not lived these many years, and that thou hast not been born again to me. Nay, look not so. Put away that pale cast of doubt. For oh, be sure, herein can error find no foothold. Sooner shall the suns forget their course, and the swallow miss her nest, than my soul shall swear a lie, and be led astray from thee, Callicrates. Blind me, take away mine eyes, and let the darkness utterly fence me in, and still mine ears would catch the tone of thy unforgotten voice, striking more loud against the portals of my sense than can the call of brazen-throated clarions. Stop up mine hearing also, and let 1,000 touch me on the brow, and I would name thee out of all. Yea, rob me of every sense, and see me stand deaf and blind and dumb, and with nerves that cannot weigh the value of a touch. Yet would my spirit leap within me like a quickening child, and cry unto my heart, Behold, Callicrates! Behold, thou watcher, the watchers of thy night are ended. Behold, thou who seekest in the night season, thy morning star ariseth. She paused a while, and then continued, But stay, if thy heart is yet hardened against the mighty truth, and thou dost require a further pledge of that which thou dost find too deep to understand, even now shall it be given to thee. and to thee also, O my Holly. Bear each one of you a lamp, and follow after me whither I shall lead you." Without stopping to think, indeed, speaking for myself, I had almost abandoned the function in circumstances under which to think seemed to be absolutely useless, since thought fell hourly helpless against a black wall of wonder, we took the lamps and followed her. Going to the end of her boudoir, she raised a curtain and revealed a little stair of the sort that is so common in these dim caves of Koa. As we hurried down the stair, I observed that the steps were worn in the centre to such an extent that some of them had been reduced from 7½ inches, at which I guessed their original height, to about 3½ Now, all the other steps that I had seen in the caves were practically unworn, as was to be expected, seeing that the only traffic which ever passed upon them was that of those who bore a fresh burden to the tomb. Therefore this fact struck my notice with that curious force with which little things do strike us when our minds are absolutely overwhelmed by a sudden rush of powerful sensations. Beaten flat, as it were, like a sea beneath the first burst of a hurricane, so that every little object on the surface starts into an unnatural prominence. At the bottom of the staircase I stood and stared at the worn steps, and Asia, turning, saw me. "Wonderest thou whose are the feet that have worn away the rock, my Holly?" she asked. "They are mine, even mine own light feet. I can remember when those stairs were fresh and level, but for 2000 years and more have I gone down hither day by day, and see, my sandals have worn out the solid rock." I made no answer, but I do not think that anything that I had heard or seen brought home to my limited understanding so clear a sense of this being's overwhelming antiquity as that hard rock hollowed out by her soft white feet. How many hundreds of thousands of times must she have passed up and down that stair to bring about such a result? The stair led to a tunnel, and a few paces down the tunnel was one of the usual curtain-hung doorways, a glance at which told me that it was the same where I had been a witness of that terrible scene by the leaping flame. I recognized the pattern of the curtain, and the sight of it brought the whole event vividly before my eyes, and made me tremble even at its memory. Asia entered the tomb, for it was a tomb, and we followed her. I, for one, rejoicing that the mystery of the place was about to be cleared up, and yet afraid to face its solution. End of chapter 20. Recording by Graham Redman.